Okay, we are live. Let's just confirm. What's up? This is Eitan Ben Avraham. Nice shirt, Shammai.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing the shirt for the occasion.
Yes, I'm wearing my Zion shirt for Yom. Wait, are you wearing it for Yom Ha'atzmaut or you're wearing it for
No, this is the shirt that I wear to work out. It gives me extra powers.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. What's up to whoever's watching? We just got our first watcher, but we are going to speak because this is being recorded for history. But let's just see what's going on here. Okay, we are live, man. We are live. Okay. So, all right, so Shammai, what's going on is basically it is Yom Ha'atzmaut here in the Holy Land of Israel. And what's nice is it's actually falling on the 5th of Iyar, which is when Yom Ha'atzmaut is supposed to happen. And it's like it's so easy to just have a barbecue and kind of like go through the day, go through the motions of the day, listen to some music. Yeah, it's Israeli independency. And in a certain sense, it's almost kind of like July 4th in the United States of America, where it's like, are you really thinking about the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and the great experiment of what it means that this is the United States of America, right? And I think it's the same thing here in Israel, except I think it's even more complicated because it's not only Zionism, it's the roots of Zionism, which is Torah. And in some ways, Zionism and Torah don't actually mesh because the people who founded the state of Israel very often had renounced Torah, right? So there's so many layers to this day of Yom Ha'atzmaut. And so that's what I wanted to do is just check in and get into what is Yom Ha'atzmaut all about? What is going on here when we're celebrating this day? What happened in history that we're connecting to, and how is it expressing itself through us?
Wow, that's quite a lot to unpack.
Well, we
You'd
go
like to
deep
get
here in our
through,
mail.
through all of that before Yom Ha'atzmaut ends?
Yeah,
Well,
I know, right?
let's just jump in and see where we get to. I mean, it's a lot to unpack. Obviously, these are things that weigh really heavily. I know. I mean, we've opened up about these ideas in the past. It seems like every year, me and you revisit this, and like every year we get like to a new level of understanding, or we attack it
Yeah,
from a
that's
new
the
angle.
goal. From new place on the spiral.
Yeah, a new place on the spiral upwards, hopefully. So yeah, I
Amen.
mean, like, I guess I can start from like one point that you made before, that I think that this is like a big struggle for Jews today that are on the one hand very spiritually attuned and want to be able to tap in to the wisdom of God, have their lives oriented towards that and be influenced by it. And on the other hand, they feel, well, I shouldn't say on the other hand. In addition to that, they feel a very strong connection to Israel. And as you said, looking at Israel's history, and indeed even like many of the characterizing elements of current Israel, modern Israel as it is, and they see that it's not so much in line with those values, and certainly where it emerged from, and how to like make a how to like work that out in our inner experience, and how to take action, and live our lives and integrate those values. I think a really good place to start is really to go like all the way back to the beginning and try to understand what is really the nature of Jewish spirituality and the Jewish mandate, because it's very often, especially as
Wait, hold on a
Westerners,
second. Hit
we
pause. Hit pause. You just said two things that are really important to parse out. You said Jewish spirituality and
Mhm.
Jewish mandate, and those could easily be looked at as diametrically opposite things. Jewish spirituality is rooted in Torah and is intangible, and even the Torah and mitzvot, like there's no on a certain level, we're doing it because it's a commandment from Hashem. We're not doing it for some practical reason. And the Jewish mandate is like the Zionistic initiative, which is incredibly practical and doesn't necessarily on the surface require any sort of faith. It's a nationalistic movement, at least on the surface.
Right. Okay. So yes, that is an interesting point. What I meant by mandate was, when we go back and see the origin story of the Jewish people, the meta narrative, right? The narrative arc of the Jewish people and how that gets kicked off. I mean, for everyone who knows just a little bit about Jewish history, and everyone does, this is kicked off in the Exodus, right? In Yetziat Mitzrayim,
Let my people go.
Yeah, the leaving from Egypt, and
The
then
Jews
journeying
were slaves in Egypt.
journeying to Sinai, right? I think we discussed in a different context. I'm forgetting all these different these different internet conversations we're having with people. I'm getting confused. But I think we talked about a while ago the idea that the Exodus of Egypt, like that translation, is a little misleading, because in Hebrew when we say Yitziat, the leaving from, it's like someone says, like, yeah, I'm in my house, I'm going out. So they don't mean that I'm going out of my house and I'm going to wait outside for 5 minutes and go back in. What they mean is that I'm going out to somewhere. That's what that means. So when we say Yitziat Mitzrayim, it's similar to that. The going out from Egypt to somewhere, right? That's the implication. And the going out to somewhere is the going out to Sinai. That's the idea. They're leaving Egypt with the intention of going to Sinai. It's not just going out for the sake of going out. Like you would think, well, going out is for the sake of going out because they were slaves and they were suffering. So that wasn't the point, to leave Egypt. But that wasn't the only point. The point was to leave Egypt and go on a journey towards where they were supposed to get to. So that's the so receiving the mandate of the Jewish people, what I see that as is what is the plan that the Jewish people receive? What are they supposed to put into action? What is the plan they're supposed to put into action at Sinai? Like, what is that mandate? And that mandate is pretty clear, right? The mandate is, right, God tells Moses, speak to the people, make them an offer. Tell them this is my offer to them. I am offering this, right? And what is the offer? Va'atem tiyu li, you will be unto me, right? I'm quoting now from Exodus 19. Anyone who wants to look this up, so I'm not making anything up, right? Atem tiyu li, you will be unto me. Mamlechet Kohanim, the Goy Kadosh, a nation of priests and a holy people. A nation of priests and a holy people, right? So notice how God does not introduce this as saying, listen, I have this secret wisdom, I have this secret information that only I know. And if you accept this from me, I will give you this secret information and you will be the bearers of this secret knowledge. That's not what's being said. Right. Obviously, the Jewish people were granted unique wisdom, and the Torah does talk about, right, how the Jewish people will be praised for their unique wisdom, and indeed the Bible on the basis for many legal systems throughout the world, and how that's influenced Western civilization and other civilizations. Like, obviously, that's all true, right? But the point was not that they're being given some unique wisdom that now they are the sole bearers of that wisdom. It was much more than that. The idea was that the Jewish people are meant to create a nation and a society that all the facets of that society are permeated by that wisdom, by those spiritual truths. It's not meant to be that we're just a multitude of hermits living in caves, living on mountaintops, meditating, and people come and visit us sometime. We're supposed to actively set up a structure in all the spheres and all the quadrants, to start using the integral terminology, with all of the all of the areas, and all of those facets, all of those areas of life are filled, permeated with that wisdom. That was the man, right? Now, I think, right, just to take this a step forward, for the majority, I would say even the vast majority, I guess it depends how you define these things, but certainly for the majority of the Jewish people's history, we were not living that reality, right? The Jewish people were not in a position, practically speaking, or perhaps spiritually speaking as well, but certainly practically speaking, we weren't in circumstances where we were able to do that, right? We were not living in any form of sovereignty. We were out of our land. The circumstances were very dire, right? At best, we were, in kind of like lukewarm peace with whoever, with whatever government or people we were living amongst, and we weren't really in a position to play that out. We weren't in a position to bring that into full expression for the vast majority of our history, right? And obviously, the last time around, since the destruction of the last Jewish Commonwealth, which was over 19 centuries ago, the Jewish people really haven't had the ability to do that. And one of the symptoms of that, and I think that what I'm about to say is going to resonate with a lot of people. I hope that's not too presumptuous, but the result of this has been that the Jewish ideal has collapsed into this very, very narrow idea of what Torah and what Hebrew spirituality is. It's collapsed to the realm of the individual inner experience.
You mean like the Jew by himself? Is that what you mean?
Sorry, no, I'm not saying it's the individual to the exclusion of all others. What I'm saying is that the Torah is only applicable in the realm of individual experience. That's where it's relevant. It's not relevant on a societal level, on societal structures, national structures, governmental structures. It's not relevant. It's relevant only to the private sphere. Right? Indeed, like the books that we see as the primal sources of Jewish practice, of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, for instance. Right? I'm sure some of these names will be familiar to people. Right? These are works that deal with these areas, with the areas that are relevant to the individual's obligation, the individual's experience. How a person
there are 8 people watching right now.
Sorry?
There are 8 people watching right.
Oh, welcome to all 8. Wait, does that 8 include us, or it's 8 in addition to us?
8 in addition to us.
8 in addition to us.
Conversation. People, please leave some comments.
Yes, please do. I'm curious. So, yeah, does any of this resonate, Eitan?
Well, yes, but how do we zoom in a little bit more to today?
How do we zoom into today? Okay, so where are we today that's unique from the last 1900 years of Jewish history? We're met with challenges that we haven't had to really address. And again, whether we're going to look at it as not having to put up with the challenges, or not meriting to have the challenges, regardless of how you want to look at it. The point is that before we didn't have to, and now we do have to. Right? There are areas of life that we now have to figure out what is the authentic Jewish way of addressing these things. These were questions that no one had to think about. They were not on people's radar at all.
By the way, shout out to Gedalia and Yisrael Levine. Yisrael Levine sends his regards. I don't know if you see that in the comments.
Yeah, Yisrael sent me a message last night of our Yom Ha'atzmaut Farbrengen from like 4 or 5 years ago.
Of you and I.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It was very, very nostalgic. Very, very nice. Yeah. So things about like how to set up a Jewish government, how to set up a Jewish army, how to set up a Jewish electrical company, right? How to right? all these things that are at the national and civic level, right? That give a totally different domain and dimension to Jewish expression. These things are incredibly unique, right? And I think that people that are first timers that come to this country, I've heard this story in one version or another. I can't tell you how many times, countless times. It hits people when they go to a shopping mall and they're walking in the shopping mall and they're buying whatever it is that they're buying. And on the loudspeaker comes an announcement, right? There will be mincha in 20 minutes. Okay. Right. And it they do like a double take and they're like, what is is there a fire? Like what, is there a sale somewhere? Like what did they just say? And then no, I heard right. There's mincha in 20 minutes. Why are there's mincha in 20 minutes? Because they're in a place they're in a place that cares about the fact that there's going to be mincha in 20 minutes.
In the mall.
Here, probably not, but like there's enough people there that care that they're going to announce it on the loudspeaker of the entire mall. Like that's what they're going to do. Now that's like a relative. It's a cute example, obviously. It's not.
It's right? Only an Israel moment.
Right. Yes. But what does that mean in Israel moment? There are countless examples of this, obviously, right? As I said a second ago, this is just a cute, little anecdote to highlight the point that I'm trying to make. The point is that the defining difference between our reality in the land of Israel today and the situation that the Jewish people had to deal with for nearly 2 millennium until this point is that they were never able to be in an environment where the whole environment and all of its dimensions was able to be permeated by the Jewish message.
I think
it always was in a collapsed state in the realm of the individual, right? And it's specifically this idea of like the environment making space, living in the space that you want to be in, right? At all the levels, at the individual level, familial, communal, national. That's really what I was hoping we can dive into a little bit more, because it's also a very big theme that we talk about in Aleph Male in general. Like this is the works of sacred Jewish masculinity of when we act in a certain way, really what we're trying to do is to create space for us to be the people that we want to be, right? You create patterns of behavior. It's not just you acting in a vacuum. That's not the way that you should look at it, right? Certainly not the most effective way to look at it. Really what you're doing is you're creating a domain for yourself in which to be in. I think we hit on this point a lot. Going back to the primordial stages of creation, right? The way that creation happened, the kickstart action of creation, was not that God snapped his fingers and something was created. That wasn't the first step. The first step of creation was what is Kabbalistically referred to as, right, the tzimtzum, and in other terms, I don't want to get into the jargon. The jargon is never good. But the first step was to create space. That was the first step, to create a space, right? They call it, right, the halal panoi, as the
that's the aleph.
Space. Huh?
That's the aleph.
Correct. Right? The initial space in which things can exist. That's the first step, right? And then everything else takes place in that context. So the space and the context and the domain is everything. Obviously, the specificities take place within the space. Obviously, the specificities are important. But really everything goes back to the space and the domain which you make, right? And it's all about the domain. And until this point, the domain was super constricted. It was like, this is the domain. Everything outside the domain is questionable at best and impure and dangerous at worst, right? This is the domain. It's like, it's this narrow 4 cubits, right? But now we have an opportunity, right? And this is the reality that we're living in. And I think this is what makes many people excited and uncomfortable, or perhaps both, right? The fact that it is incumbent upon us now to work with that reality, work with that responsibility. We now have domains that we need to address. Like we can't run away from it.
So
right?
just to translate what you're saying into my own words, before the existence of the state of Israel, the domain that the Jewish people operated in was one of being guests in another sovereign nation's country. We were always guests, and as guests, we could always be kicked out. And as guests, in terms of domains, we had our little shtetl, we had our neighborhoods, which we had a certain level of dominion. But there's a very big difference between being a guest, as a people for literally thousands of years in another sovereign nation's country versus having our own sovereign nation, where it's our electrical company, our water company, our roads, our telephone wires, our cellular satellite networks. All of these things are actually ours, and we as a people have not experienced this really since, maybe even before the destruction of the Second Temple, because by the time Herod came around, it could be argued we no longer even had sovereignty except in a fictitious way.
Correct. That last period was really kind of like a puppet a puppet state, and we were really already fully ensconced in the Roman Empire by then.
And some people would make an argument that that's our relationship now with the United States, but I would disagree.
I think that's a little extreme. I think that there's certainly to talk about
on the extreme. That's an extreme perspective. But on that note, I just want to give props to David Ben-Gurion, because there was so much pressure. I was watching a documentary last night. The vote to found the state of Israel was 6-4 in terms of the people in I believe it was the Jewish agency, like the council, in which Ben-Gurion was sitting with Golda Meir, with others. I'm pretty sure Golda Meir was on that council. It was like 6-4. There was so much pressure on the Jewish people not to start to vote, not to begin this venture. There was so much pressure, and that was one of the things that I experienced recently with my wife. We were driving to Hadera on Yom HaZikaron, the day before yesterday, and we were just talking about how, like, the chances, the chutzpah of what the Jewish people did in creating the state of Israel was a huge act of chutzpah. It was a huge act of chutzpah. It was like all the normative countries and nations and civilizations didn't want us to do this.
Yeah. And I mean, it was that sense of chutzpah that kind of brought Israel through its early stages and brought it to where it is today. The thing that I'm kind of lamenting is that I think we might be losing that a little bit. I think we might be losing that.
I think we might be becoming so successful that we're losing our chutzpah. As in, we've normalized our success. Our success has become normative.
Correct.
We've institutionalized the ability to just have the means, like food production, all of these things. I mean, Baruch Hashem, man, it's absolutely amazing. That we have the things that we have. I read an article recently
written by this couple that moved from New Zealand in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere around that. They were this very Zionistic couple. Both of them were doctors, and they came here because they were like, there's a Jewish state. We have an obligation to come here and to help with the building. And they said they were writing in a very detail-oriented way what Jerusalem was like in those days. This is 5 decades ago. Okay, there was a year-long waiting list to get a phone installed in your house, a phone line, a year-long waiting list. Today, people don't even have landlines because the cheapest and most efficient cell service in the world is in this country, and like, why bother getting a landline, right? But I mean, just to give you a perspective, this isn't like in living memory. There are people that experience all of this, right? And it's like in a flash. It's like we went from a total dysfunction and like nothing works to like being world leaders in different things.
Yeah,
So,
on that note, I just want to say I still think it's absolutely amazing, and I think that we have to talk about it. Like that, it's only 72 years. This nation has been here only 72 years, and in the history of mankind, there has never been a nation that has built the infrastructure and had the logistical success that Israel has had in 72 years. Like, you look at the Azrieli Towers in Tel Aviv, you look at Highway 1 and Highway 6, you look at just the infrastructure that has been built in the Middle East in 72 years. It's no wonder there is so much jealousy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And on that note, in terms of a spiritual mandate, it is the Jewish people who created that initiative.
Yeah,
like I think
this is a good point to bring it back to where we started off with, as to like where the schism is, in terms of how we look at the role of the state, of the reality of the state within the Jewish people's mission. I think that this is where the schism starts, because there are people that see these things as it's hard to choose the language. I'm gonna say it as accurately as I can, and then we'll try to unpack it a little bit. There are people that view, I think, there are people that view these things that you mentioned before, the Israeli towers, the roads, the cell service. I gave that example, but all these different things, they see these infrastructural material accomplishments as the victories in and of themselves. Like this is what we were waiting for. This is it, right? And in a way, there's a lot of truth in that, because like clearly God, the Torah, right, the Jewish spiritual tradition does give value to these things, right? There's a famous section of Talmud that I was actually looking at 2 days ago at the end of Tractate Sanhedrin, on I think it's page 108. It says that there was this very wicked king of Israel. People who aren't familiar with the history, right? After King Solomon's time, there was a split in the nation of Israel, and there was the southern kingdom in Judea and the northern kingdom that encompassed the 10 tribes in the north. Those are like the 10 lost tribes that were eventually, conquered by Assyria and exiled. So there was this very wicked king of the northern kingdom. All the kings were pretty much completely wicked and corrupt. There was this particularly very corrupt king, and the Talmud says, what was the one merit that this king had? Omri was his name, right? What was the one merit of this person, right? Shehosif krach echad be'eretz Yisrael, that he built a mighty city in the land of Israel, right? And what was the city? Shomron, right? Samaria, which today is also quite a prosperous area, right? So his merit was that he built this town. Now, what was going on in this town, right? This was a society at that time was completely permeated by idolatry, right? The prophets are constantly rebuking the people that they're not doing good, they got to change, they got to, right? And eventually, because they don't change, they're punished, right? They're exiled. God sends Assyria and exiles them, and right, that's it, they're done. But because this person, right? But this building of this city, just the material infrastructure in and of itself, was seen as a positive thing, right? There was positivity just in that. So this is not devoid of value. I don't think it's correct to say that these things are completely devoid of value.
No,
it's also a mistake to say that this is the end all be all. Like this is what we're yearning for. We're yearning for the high tech. We're yearning for the falafel. This is
right. I don't think that that we've reached our goal at all. But I think that like it's still freaking incredible, and I think that it's actually a reflection of that. It's a reflection of that same spark that has influenced the Jewish people to be, 40% of all Nobel Prize winners, even though we're 0.01% of the population of the world. Like we're constantly the exception to the rule, right? And that exception to the rule is happening on a material level. Like, another example is Bob Dylan, Karl Marx, Albert Einstein, Sigmund Freud, Levi Strauss. Like how many anti-Semites don't realize that jeans are a Jewish invention? That blue jeans were invented by the Jews. Don't they know?
Yeah, I think if I could just take the point that you're saying and put it in my own words to make sure that I get it. You're saying that all of these successes are an indication of this Sgula Yisraelit, of this,
right. And everything I just mentioned were actually secular historical phenomena. That was all. That whole list was a list of secular historical phenomena. But in my headspace as a Jew, it's like whether it's secular or religious, that distinction doesn't even fall in. It's more like the collective Weltanschauung of Am Yisrael moving through history, and that movement, that wave.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you're speaking in this way, because I think that Eitan, you're already like living in the solution to this problem. I'm trying to describe the problem so that like we can appreciate the problem, and you're already in the solution, which is good.
The problem is the dichotomy between the physical and spiritual in a Jewish context, which is really epitomized and really, I think, sort of one of the tension points that really needs to be looked at today on Yom Ha'atzmaut, right? And I just want to dive into that for a second, which is where are we physically and where are we spiritually as a people? The fact that the Jewish nation exists, that Medinat Yisrael exists, the fact that we have a dysfunctional government, right, is freaking phenomenal.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that we have this problematic state is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? And at the same time, there's so much further to go. So we've mentioned all the physical things. We've mentioned all of the success that's happened physically, right, in terms of this Jewish nation. But, spiritually, I feel as if religious Zionism is clearly a powerful force, I believe, for good. But I don't think it's I don't think it's there yet. In
Right.
terms of so we have the physical success, and then what's the spiritual success? Is religious Zionism the spiritual success? Is Kippah Sruga the spiritual success? Is Machon Meir the spiritual success? Is that ultimately what we're going for? That, there's going to be.
I think that these movements that you're talking about, like Mizrahi, like you mentioned a second ago, which was, is a rather old political organization. Mizrahi, for those who don't know, it started in order to be like the religious element within the Zionist Congress that Herzl founded, pre-state, before there was any state, before 1948, right? And it's an organization that continues to function today. And I think that the opportunity that their goal was what we're talking about now, with an understanding that in order for the Jewish people to fully actualize what they're supposed to do, there needs to be these broader dimensions, these broader venues, right? It's not enough just to have this narrow sphere perfect. Like in certain, you could take the view that if you have a bunch of Jews living, it doesn't matter where they are. If they're living in Jerusalem, they're living in Los Angeles, they're living in South Africa, it doesn't matter. You have a bunch of Jews and they're all like abiding by the laws of the Torah and living, Torah-oriented lives. Like that's perfection, right? And the counterclaim to that is it could be perfect in that domain, but in the end of the day, there are all these other domains that we need to tackle as well. And I think that was what was being pushed. So it's not a spiritual success or a material success. It's not that dichotomy. It's not either or. It's recognizing that in order to completely actualize, to completely unfold the Jewish potential, it requires these different domains that we need to actively build, right? So it is two sides. There are two sides, but at the end of the day, it's two sides of the same coin. It's the development. It's the development on a material and infrastructural level, but it's also knowing how to interact with those things and permeate the authentic Torah content, right? The hardware and the software, to be able to permeate that with the message that we want to, right? And it's a dual task. Both of those sides are exceedingly difficult to put it lightly. Right?
On that note, on that note of that difficulty, that touches on something. Yisroel Levine asked a question. I don't know if you can see the comments. It says, honest question, how should we view strong opposition to religion, which unfortunately exists in modern Israel? Of course, there's so much to be thankful for, but doesn't this opposition sort of dampen the festivities? And I want to hit that question. It's like, yes and no, because these festivities wouldn't have happened without the secular Israeli culture, which was rooted in the original pioneers and Zionists who actually rejected Torah. Like, these festivities wouldn't be happening. And at the same time, that's the no part. It doesn't dampen the festivities. The fact, like the secular opposition, in my mind, the secular opposition to Judaism within the state of Israel doesn't dampen the festivities, because, coming from the school of Rav Kook, it's actually a function of a state of consciousness, which is rejecting aspects of how Torah has become stultified.
Yeah.
Right. And that ultimately it is a evolutionary process, and that secular rejection of Torah is ultimately going to be fixed, rectified. There's going to be a tikkun with a revelation of a Torah that is able to include the resolution to why those rejections occurred in the first place. And I think, just to note, like, one of those deepest rejections is sort of the Torah by rote blind faith, obedience without content, just obey, which many people experience as religious Judaism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so of course there's going to be a ton of people who are like, sorry, man, I'm not into that. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to go to the mall. I'm going to go play some Tekken on Twitch.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
It's interesting that you're touching on this now, because I'm actually in the process right now of reviewing some of the more primary teachings of Rav Kook with one of the students in the yeshiva that I'm affiliated with, and in his most famous section, which is supposed to be talking solely about Israel, right? The famous book Orot, Lights. Mm-hmm. In the opening sections, he just jumps right in, like without warning. Like in the second paragraph, he just jumps right in to the importance of the spiritual / mystical / philosophical side of the Torah, and how when that is actively rejected, that's when we become out of touch, right? And mm-hmm. This is a recurring theme. This is a recurring theme in his whole worldview, that we become, as you said, ossified. We become just dead and sluggish when we reject that side, right? And in a way, the rejection of the land and the rejection of these broader dimensions of spiritual expression, of Jewish expression that we're talking about, that's kind of just a logical conclusion of rejecting that side, of rejecting the spiritual awareness, right? Of rejecting the secrets of Torah, right? The inner dimensions of Torah, the more profound, sublime aspects of Torah. Once we become disconnected from that, it's just natural that we kind of, descend, we devolve into this very plain version of just, blind obedience, like we're saying, right? All the vibrance is sucked out of us, and we're just, we're just kind of going through it by rote, and it just, it's just blah.
It's like, let's daven and have kiddush and go take a nap.
On the other hand, we could see, and this is also something that Rav Kook touches on, that the reason, like, this is kind of like, in a way, it's like a psychological defense mechanism, because once a person is in touch with that side of, like, the spiritual yearning, right? The spiritual yearning of the individual and of the nation to emerge and express itself, right? As we say, poetically in the Lecha Dodi poem that we sing every Friday night, right? Livshi bigdei tifarteich, right? Adorn your garments of splendor, right? When there's a yearning for that, when there's a yearning for us to adorn those royal, regal garments, and we contrast that yearning, that aspiration, with what's going on right now, that causes a lot of pain, to put it lightly. It causes a lot of discomfort, right? So recognizing the gap between where we are and where we should be is not a comfortable thing to come to terms with. So it's kind of like an individual and national defense mechanism to kind of cut ourselves off from that and not tap into that yearning, because again, tapping into the yearning is there's a lot of distress associated with it.
It's like, who is really joyous about, like, this is like a very crude question, but it's like, who's happier about the existence of the state of Israel, the religious Jews or the secular Jews?
I hear you.
Right? And it's a good question. And I think it's a complicated. Like I said,
I think you're lumping a lot of different camps into those two.
It's a crude question. That's why I said it's a crude question, right? Because there's so many. But it's like, if I were to pick that apart for a second, well, you could argue that it's the religious Jews who are happier, because they actually believe that this is our land.
Yeah.
And the secular Jews look at this as just sort of like another, some ink on a map that some power players managed to get some consensus on in collective political machinations. And we've had a certain level of success in terms of consolidating our power through infrastructure, war, influence. But and it's nice that we have this barbecue, but really we're not so different than everybody else.
Yeah. I think that the best way to answer that.
I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that argument could be made.
No, I got you. I think that the best way to answer this question, I understand that it's like a theoretical question, not aimed at a specific group. I
Right.
get it. I think that the best way to answer that is to say that each group has its own brand of pessimism.
Right, because there's
Like,
also the religious Jews who actually are very anti the state of Israel, a different
right.
set of religious Jews.
So if you come from a purely secular perspective, you can have the cynicism of like, oh, we envisioned this, like we envisioned like the secular utopia, and it's clearly not that, right? Because you have all this, this crazy tribal influence, and we still are surrounded by people that want to kill us, and it's not something that's founded completely on humanist values, and we're still clinging on to this old stuff, and we have all, and as a result, we have all this infrastructural decay and chaos, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's one version of cynicism, right? I think the religious version of cynicism is to say, well, this is supposed to be like the messianic dream coming into being, and what messianic dream has like potholes in the street and 20-minute long waiting lines when you call up the Misrat Apnim? Like what? How is that? How is this like a prophetic vision coming into being?
And also from that religious perspective, it's like, who are these secular people who are driving on Shabbos and
Correct.
going to their
Yeah.
treif restaurants and watching Pritzis on Netflix or whatever it is.
Correct. Right. So how can this possibly be? How can this possibly be the manifestation? Excuse me. Of like what the prophets are talking about when they're talking about B'shuv Hashem Shvut Amo, when God returns his nation to its land. Like how can that be what they're referring to?
Right, and so from that perspective, you could say that the religious Jews wouldn't be so happy about Yom Ha'atzmaut. They'd be like, fair, Yom Ha'atzmaut, fair.
Right.
Shabbos.
So I'm gonna grab the reins of the conversation. I want to go into like I want to hone in on that point, because it's actually a point that I feel like very strongly about, and I think that it's.
But before we do that, I want to just wrap it around. I'm just gonna throw a question to you, and then
but don't like wrap it around and then steal the conversation.
No. I'm asking a question, and then you take the reins, because I want you to come back to the question.
Okay. So you're wrapping that.
Okay. So my question for you after you take the reins, okay, is what are you joyous about in terms of Yom Ha'atzmaut?
Wait, I have to answer that question before I go into what I want
to do?
No.
Go where you want to go, but when you finish.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to hit on this point that you were talking about, that we were talking about just now, about of looking at the current reality with all of its flaws and imperfections and saying, oh, well, this can't really be the dream because of the flaws and imperfections, right? I think that understanding why that's the wrong way to look at things is very important, both from a historical context and also just on the individual level of having a proper, healthy perspective on things in general, right? So just to like go back just to like a little bit in Jewish history to understand that every single event, every single one, without exception, every single event that we celebrate as Jewish people, right? Whether these events are mandated to be celebrated in the Torah or afterwards they were enacted by the rabbis and established as holidays, right? Every single holiday took place in a highly dysfunctional context that remained pretty dysfunctional even after the apparent, great redemption. It stayed pretty dysfunctional. So the thing that we're celebrating is always, again, without exception, is always a huge burst of light and salvation within the context of tremendous dysfunction, okay? Let's just go through and give a few examples, okay? The giving of the Torah, right? We're going to celebrate B'ezrat Hashem in a few weeks. We're going to celebrate Shavuot, which is the giving of the Torah, right? What happened on that day, right, of the giving of the Torah, okay? We received the tablets, and then we were told to, behave while Moses goes up and receives the rest of the Torah, and then we immediately descended into the sin of the golden calf, and the tablets were broken, okay? That's what occurred on Shavuot. So yes, there was a tremendous divine revelation, which we received the 10 Commandments, and it was great, right? We declared Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and here we will, right? We accept the Torah full-heartedly, and then that was immediately followed by a horrible catastrophe. In many ways, the rabbis see, right, the sin of the golden calf as in many ways the worst sin in Jewish history. Okay, we had, right? We have after that Hanukkah, let's say. Hanukkah is a really good example, okay? Hanukkah occurred in the very beginning of a 25-year bloody struggle against the Assyrian Greeks, which was also a civil war amongst the Jewish people. This was in the initial stages, the very initial stages of this war. The Jewish people managed to reconquer the Temple Mount. They came to a temple that was in complete shambles, complete ruins. Right? They lit a small rudimentary menorah that they were able to put together. The golden menorah wasn't there. It had been, ransacked and stolen, right? They lit a small little menorah, and then, right, that was the big victory, okay? Later, the temple was retaken by the Greeks, right? Judah Maccabeus, right? Judah Maccabee was killed, right? Many of the Maccabees were killed. And then even the ensuing peace that took place after the war was over, right? The Maccabees that took over, famously, for anyone who knows a little bit of the history, they were incredibly corrupt. Many of them even became Hellenized themselves, right? This was not, a happily ever after situation. Mm-hmm. Anyone with a cursory knowledge of Jewish history understands that every single celebration, we're celebrating a situation that was not perfect.
We're celebrating like a spark of light.
We're celebrating that. Well, it's not just a spark. It's right. I would say it's like a burst, right? It's like an eruption. Light, right? Within the context of chaos and dysfunction, right? Like the rabbis even point to this on Purim, for instance. Purim is also a good example, the holiday of Purim, right? In the book of Esther, as I'm sure people are familiar with, right? The rabbis in the in Tractate Megillah, they ask, why is Purim a holiday that we don't say Hallel, the sections of the Psalms that we traditionally say on days of salvation? We say this on all the holidays. We say the prayer of Hallel. Why is it that we don't say Hallel on Purim? And the rabbis say because we say in Hallel, one of the lines in these sections of Psalms is Hallelu Avdei Hashem, right? Praise, right? The servants of God will give him praise. And how can we say that? The Akati Avdei Achashverosh Anan, the Jewish people were still the servants of Xerxes, the king of Persia. They couldn't say we are completely the servants of God because they were still the servants of the Persian Empire, right? So it's not like everything's great, let's have a party. No, they recognized that things were not really as great as they should and could be, right? But despite the fact, right, we're still celebrating, we're still hitting it hard, we're still rejoicing, we're still giving praise to God because that is what is on us to hone in on this burst of light, right? And I think that this is important for two reasons. Reason number one, we don't have to wait for things to be perfect to celebrate. That's A. And this is part of our work. This is part of our work in Jewish spirituality that we have to hone in. We have to hone in on the light. We have to hone in on the salvation that's going on. And that is what we have to celebrate.
Right, because it's so easy to zoom out and just see the dark clouds.
100%. And I want to end off this point with just one very, very powerful teaching, which I heard, which I learned many years ago from the great mystical master, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, the great Arizal, right, of Yitzchak Luria, who lived here in Eretz Yisrael 500 years ago. He's commenting on a teaching of the rabbis. This is in Tractate Sanhedrin. Second time I'm quoting Sanhedrin in our little conversation. But there's a famous teaching which Maimonides brings as well in the Laws of Kings, and the teaching is as follows: Ein bein olam hazeh liyamot ben David. There is no difference between this world and the days of the Messiah. Ela shibud malchiyot bilvad. The only difference is that we are not going to be subjugated under foreign nations. That's the only difference, right? But the natural world will be the same. It will not be a miraculous, supernatural situation. It'll be the regular, normal world, and the only difference is that we're not going to be subjugated under the nations anymore. Okay? So here's the problem with that. It seems to, first of all, it's just phrased in a way that seems to be very much undermining the significance of that period of history. Yeah, there's no difference. The only difference is that we're not going to be subjugated under the nations anymore. That's the only difference. But B, there seems to be outright contradictions between this statement and the description of this period of history in the prophets. The prophets speak very, very highly of the stage of redemption. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful, right? And one particular verse that he hones in on is the famous verse from Isaiah, this is in Jeremiah. V'malad haaretz de'at Hashem kamayim layam mechasim. That the knowledge of God will permeate the earth as water permeates the sea. The same way that water covers the entire sea, right? That will be like the knowledge of God in the world. It will just completely, right, spread over the entire world, all over existence, right? So how can it be that the most accurate description that the rabbis can give of this incredible revolution in world history is that the only difference is going to be that we're not going to be subjugated under the nations anymore. So the Arizal says like this. I think this is extremely profound, and we don't have to wait till the Messiah to apply this. This verse, right, describing how the knowledge of God will permeate the earth, is phrased very, very specifically. Knowledge of God will permeate the earth as the water of the ocean covers the sea, right? Says the Arizal, there are places in the ocean that are much deeper than other places, right? There are places in the ocean that are miles deep, right? It just keeps on going, right? 8 miles, 10 miles down until you reach the floor. And there are certain sections of the ocean that are relatively shallow, right? Like they're not so deep, right? You go on the beach, you're sitting there and your ankles are covered by water, but that's basically it, right? It depends on your perspective, right? Your perspective in terms of what's going on is key, right? There are places that you could recognize tremendous depth and tremendous meaning in what's going on, and there are other people that are going to take the situation as just a shallow, right? There's no difference between now and before. There are some minor geopolitical changes, but that's basically it, right? But what that opens up is the possibility for tremendous depth. Yes, on the surface level, if you look at it from the outside, the changes could be minor, changes could be minute, but those minute external changes are giving an indication for an internal revolution, an internal upheaval that is tremendously significant, right? And this is the work of celebrating all events in Jewish history. All events in Jewish history, it's a form of work. It's not just a reaction to something. Oh, this event happens, so we're going to respond in that way. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. That's not what it is at all. The celebration is an active work. It's an inculcating into the consciousness of the significance of what just happened. What just happened, right? This is the significance of what just happened. Unbelievable, right? And to think about that, and to internalize that, and to fan that.
Shammai, on that note, like what just happened?
So I think we've been circling this point for this entire time. What we are celebrating over here is that this is a game changer in Jewish history in terms of what we are capable of doing and what we now have the tools to do. Right? I guess that's the same thing, right? We have been given the dimensions and the space to express the Jewish expression, the authentic Jewish expression, in ways that has never been able to be expressed before, right? For 1900 years, we haven't been able to actualize these things. We haven't been able to actualize the authentic Jewish expression. It's collapsed until this point. Until this point, we've been living in extremely constricted confines of Jewish expression. And now we're in a place where it could really be the authentic Jewish image, the authentic Jewish picture, right? It can all be brought.
And in your mind, what does that authentic Jewish picture look like? Or what's your piece of the puzzle? What's your piece of the puzzle?
I mean, I guess there's a lot of specific things that I could say, but if I were to sum it up, it would be all of the facets and domains of national life are built and strong at the material and infrastructural level, and they are thoroughly infused with Jewish spirituality. They're operated from the mode of Jewish spirituality. They express Jewish spirituality, and they try to emulate outwards those values of Jewish spirituality, and they become models. They become models about how to have the Yesod Hagashmi.
So it's like
the material basis, right? To be a mishkan for Kvod Shamayim, to be a dwelling place for the glory of heaven.
So it's that
is the yearning.
So it's like so it's like in a certain sense they're all like fractals or partsufim of the Beit HaMikdash, right? It's like the electric company is a fractal of the Beit HaMikdash, and the road works, the Department of Public Works, the Misrad HaBriyut, the Misrad HaPanim, the Knesset, all of these things contain their functional element as practical practical projects in order for society to function, right? Like, you know, but at the same time, they also are deeply, deeply spiritual.
Correct. I think that every single individual, regardless of where you live in Israel, outside Israel, regardless of the circumstances, I think everyone can understand the point I'm trying to hone in on with one very, very simple example. We all understand that there's a distinction between a house on the one hand and a home on the other hand, right? A house is not the same thing as a home. A home is something ethereal. It's something you experience. It's something that needs to be built actively, not just out of material, but it needs to be an emotional, psychological, even spiritual experience that a family builds, right? That's a home. And a house is, it's a building, right? It's a structure. It's a physical structure. What's the difference? Where is the split between the house and the home? Like, where's the difference between those two things? And if you say, where is my home? So you point to the house. That's where you point to. You point to the house. You say, but the home isn't, I thought the home isn't the house. Yes, you're right. The home is not the house. They're two different things. But where does the home dwell? Where is there a place for the home to be? In order for the home to be, there needs to be the material substrate for it to exist. And that's the house. So really the home and the house aren't distinct in a way. They're really fused together. They're completely integrated together, right?
Sure.
Because in order for one to exist, the other one needs to as well. Right? They're interdependent, right? And I think this is just a natural part of our human experience of understanding that the material substrate of the thing that gives expression to the deeper actualization that we're trying to get to, right? Those things are not really distinct. Right, that dualistic approach is not really how we experience the world. Really, like we understand intellectually that they're distinct, but but experientially, existentially, they're not really distinct.
Right? Okay, so what are you grateful for in terms of Yom Ha'atzmaut?
Sorry,
what are you grateful for? Like, as in, you've to a certain extent you've been speaking at an abstract level. There's elements of truth in terms of your own personhood in those abstract concepts that you've been sharing, but what are you personally grateful for this Yom Ha'atzmaut, the Medinat Yisrael?
Wow, there's a lot of great things that I can focus on. I'm drinking this exquisite coffee right now from our friends at Power Coffee that just make like the most unbelievable divine coffee, which is
shout out to Brandon and Steph at Power Coffee.
Shout out to Brandon and Stephanie at Power Coffee, who like make the most exquisite. I mean, if it was just for that, like the whole Zionist project, in my opinion, could be justified just for being able to bring this coffee to the Middle East. And the Middle East already had some pretty good coffee, but like it all could be. It was not for naught. It was just to bring this coffee to the Middle East. There's like a lot of things that I can hone in on, but I think like we recently. I mean, it's not so recent anymore, but like we saw not so long ago the underground train being brought to Jerusalem, right? The line between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Yeah,
it takes 20 minutes now underground from the central bus station to it's not the central bus station anymore. It's just the central station because it's not just buses. It's the light rail, it's the buses, it's the train, it's everything. 20 minutes from there to Tel Aviv. Unbelievable.
About 25 minutes. 25 minutes.
Yeah.
If you don't stop.
By the time you sit down and get comfortable, like you're there. It's like there's nothing. It's really incredible. And it's very incredible that in one direction, you're going to Tel Aviv, you're going to the industrial technological center of port city of the Jewish state, and that's one direction. And then the other direction brings you back to, the spiritual epicenter of the Jewish people, which is the center of Jewish learning, the center of prayers, the center of, of all of our metaphysical longing, like since our inception, right? Those are it's the two sides of the same rail, two sides of the same train line, right? And I go in both directions very often, right? Anyone who knows me knows that I kind of straddle both of those things. Thank God. But that's something that I'm pretty thankful for. It's come in handy both practically and on other levels as well.
Yeah, I would say this Yom Ha'atzmaut, in terms of gratitude for Medinat Yisrael. I mean, listen, there's so many things. I'm just going to do a little ramble. First of all, I'm grateful for the IDF. I mean, it's just like, I mean, you're in the IDF. I was talking about this yesterday, how like, a lot of people in America don't necessarily know people who are in the military. It's such a big country, but it's like, for me, I know so many of my friends are in the IDF, and it's like, you and I wouldn't be able to have this schmooze right now. Like, I'm not worried about ISIS right now, and the only reason is because of the IDF, in a sense, obviously Hashem, but like, it's like on a functional level, we have borders and we have guns to defend those borders, and we have technology, and we have an entire army that's active all the freaking time, so that my wife can order Super Saul and have it delivered to our place. You know what I mean? It's just absolutely astounding to me, the level of cooperation that exists within this country. And on that note, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the people of Israel. I'm grateful for all of the people who are here in this country, who are making this country happen. It's like, it's a collective endeavor, even though we don't necessarily encounter the myriads of people who are involved in so many things. It's like the oranges in my refrigerator, the water coming out of my sink, the electricity that's powering the light bulbs, the floors of my building. It's just like the literally the physical fabric that makes up my day-to-day existence is the collective efforts of so many people in Medinat Yisrael.
Yeah.
So like, I'm just tremendously.
The supply chain is something that a lot of people in the Western world are now becoming a little bit more aware of. Like the fact that every step of the way, there are a lot of people and a lot of expertise and a lot of technology that are involved in that brought that from where it started to your door a lot. And all those people doing what they need to do. It's incredible that anything works. Like the fact that anything works ever is just a freaking miracle.
Yes.
But it's really, but like when you think about the fact that, all of that is like happening here in this small little country, like, from the chicken coops to the orange groves to the vineyards to, everything. It's all happening, and it's all being brought to you. And like,
So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the people of Israel. I'm grateful for the IDF. I'm grateful for the people of Israel who are making this country happening. Shout out to all the essential workers out there, who are packing these groceries and stocking the shelves and keeping that supply chain going. And also shout out to all the medical workers out there in these times of COVID. I'm also clearly grateful for all of the Torah teachers out there here in Eretz Yisrael who have had an influence on me and allow me to appreciate the consciousness of Yom Ha'atzmaut from something more than just a nationalist victory, which it is, but that that it's more than a nationalist victory. It is also a spiritual victory for Am Yisrael, and not just from a you could say religious Zionist perspective, but from a perspective of the Jewish people living with greater embodiment, and through that embodiment allowing the light that is inside of us, both collectively and individually, to inhabit our bodies. Meaning there's a very big difference between a Jew living outside of Eretz Yisrael and a Jew living in Eretz Yisrael. Like literally the fact that our bodies are in Eretz Yisrael automatically changes our consciousness and allows a greater revelation of Hashem's light to come through us just by virtue of the fact that we're in Eretz Yisrael. And so I'm grateful for Eretz Yisrael, and for the fact that Medinat Yisrael facilitates that spiritual existence in Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah. Very nice. Very well said.
Yeah. And I think that it's so easy to take it for granted. Like, like I knew a lot of people in America who are sort of in the counterculture who are very cynical of America. And it's like, God bless America. Like, I'm a freaking patriot, man. I love America, right? And it's like, to be honest, I don't like those America jokes because I think that it kind of like, it kind of downplays just how great America is and the light that was brought down through the founding fathers into what America is now, even with all of its problems, and in the same way, even though Medinat Yisrael has all of its problems and all of its imperfections, it's like, man, this project, this Zionist dream is facilitating such an incredibly deep experience for me as a Jew to be living here.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to hate on it.
I think on that point, I think this is a really good answer to the question that we got before about how do we respond to a lot of the the cynic, either anti-religious or anti-state, anti-this, anti-that. Like, how do we respond? And the way to respond is to just build. That's the way to respond. Like, if the cynics say this and this and that, or this isn't working, that's broken, that's defunct, this is chaotic. So the response is just to continue building, right? Like that's the response. And by embodying the vision, by embodying the dream more and more, that is ultimately the answer. You don't give an answer to these types of questions by intellectualizing it. First of all, if someone's asking the question in that way, it's already clear that intellectualizing it won't do anything. But really, the ultimate answer is to keep on building. Like that is the ultimate.
I think that's an important note, because in building, what you're doing is you're creating a vessel for the emergent consciousness of Hashem through us. Let me see if I can add some levushim to those words. It's like, through building, through not giving up, through not quitting, through not throwing up your hands and saying, forget about this whole thing, right? Which is kind of like, in a certain sense, it's a mushal for what Hashem did with Noah, right? As in, Hashem's like, okay, forget it. We're flooding the whole project and we're starting over with Noah, right? It's too many problems. We're flooding the whole thing.
Yeah.
We're killing everybody off but Noah. We're starting off with Noah again, right? So it's like you look at all of the problems of Medinat Yisrael, you could be like, forget it, delete, It's like, okay, well, we can't delete. So then what are we supposed to do? So like you said, so then we build. But then what does build? But there are so many problems. Why are you building? There are so many problems. Why are you building?
There's enough niches for everyone to find their spot. There's plenty. Absolutely. There's more than enough to go around. Trust me.
More than enough what to go around?
There's more than enough niches of potential improvement to go around for everyone. And everyone, trust me, I'm not speaking in the air over here. I'm speaking from
you're talking about the ability for
people a little bit of hard-earned experience.
You mean for people to give, for people to contribute, even though there's all these problems? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, people can make things just infinitely, exponentially better than they could be. Me and a group of friends. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Chaverim, Kilat Chaverim. Me and a few friends a few years ago, we decided, you know what? Be great if there was like some communal structure over here, a place where people can go, a place where people can meet up, on Shabbat, and have events, and have resources for people that are in need, people that need help with their kids and help with their family, like looking for jobs, like all these like simple things, right? It would be great if there was like a network like that, right? And we do it, right? We got the resources, we got the network, we even got the space, right? It's like, I mean, people's lives are just exponentially better.
And so
I don't know if this is like bringing about, like a complete revolution in anyone's in any particular person's life, but it's certainly making substantial improvements for all the people in this neighborhood, right? Just resources there that are like great.
And that's the emergence. That's the emergence. That's what happens through building, is emergence. Like,
and this is something. This is like a side project that we like do in our spare time. Like we all work. We have like there are those of us that have families, and like we're all busy. This is just like a side project, and this little side project is a major resource for people, right? There are people calling us all the time, need help with this, need to have this worked out. Like all those people wouldn't, like where would they go? Like where would they go if this wasn't there, right? All those people, a few years that we've been doing this, it's like how much good have we put out there? And
yeah, and I think that building, that response to chaos is to build.
Correct.
Right? Like that response to, in a certain sense, chaos and loss. Because I think what happens is that people see these things that are wrong, and to a certain extent, it breaks their heart, right? Because what they're yearning for is something good. And so then they could think then let's just throw the project away. And that's like the flood. Let's just, it's like a flood of tears. It's going to kill everything, right? From broken heart. Right. And it's like, no, but really, I'm speaking metaphorically, but those who understand what I'm talking about. And it's like, okay, we could do that. We could go there, but you could also build. And in building, it's like yesh ma'ayin. It's like you're going to discover that actually, no, like you don't actually have to start over. You just have to keep going. Right. And if you keep going, which is, I think, seriously, man, like Israel itself is the example par excellence of through moving forward, emerging to higher levels of order and structure and goodness. I mean, look where we started. Right. Like I met a woman from Kibbutz Levi who said that, when she first got started pre-state, the special treat that they got on Shabbos was half of a hard-boiled egg.
My God.
Like that's how little food they had. That's how little resources they had, that the thing that they got to eat on Shabbat that was special was half of a hard-boiled egg.
I gotta tell you, dude, I'm appreciating eggs so much these days after that little egg shortage, which how long did it last? Like a week? Like there was like an egg shortage for a week and everyone's freaking out, My God, I'm so grateful that we have eggs.
But it's like it was a critical week. And at the same time, on that note, and then all of a sudden, like we're flying in 60 million eggs for the people. The people of Israel need eggs. It's amazing. It's amazing what this country does. And that's the other thing, is that like I really feel part of something bigger than myself here. That's another piece of what I'm grateful for in terms of, this Yom Ha'atzmaut, is I'm grateful that I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. That's not just like a spiritual thing, like I'm connected to God. It's like, no, I'm connected to a people. I'm connected to the people of Israel, Am Yisrael, and also in the sense of Medinat Yisrael.
I have to read something out to you now. I have to now because you mentioned what you said. This is from Rav Kook that we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Ruth.
Right. Arguably the primary text of Rav Kook's thoughts, although maybe some would debate that, but it's an important book nonetheless. Rav Kook says the following. This is in the section of Galut, the section on the war, right? And the war that he's referring to is World War I, which he's living through. He's experiencing the ravages of World War I, and like commenting on like his thoughts of like its significance to the Jewish people. Hachavaya halumit laorech kol hagalut, the national experience throughout all of the experiences of the exile, kana la'am ma'of habata, it acquired for the nation a transcendent view. Now, by transcendent view, he doesn't mean like a spiritual view, but like what we say, like a bird's eye view. Even the word that he uses, ma'of, like a bird. Like a bird flies up and like can see everything. He can see the whole picture. Someone that's lower than him sees like a tiny sliver, but he sees everything, right? Umachnisa hon rav lemerchakim, and it through that perspective the people are right. The nation is able to see far over the horizons. And also becomes capable of bringing enriching itself from all of the qualities from all of the pure qualities that it needs to acquire. So, like, what is it saying? Is a little poetic, and as we all know, Rav Kook really liked his poetic style. But the idea is this: it's a pretty straightforward idea. When you go through some serious, even traumatic experiences, very hard, powerful experiences, and you're coming with that perspective, that acquires for a person, right, for the individual and for the group, it acquires a very, very broad view of like the flow of history, the flow of time, right, where you're standing. It's like you said a second ago, this is what triggered me to think of this, right? You see yourself in the context of something bigger. I think that today, even a Jew who is not particularly affiliated with anything Jewish, doesn't have a strong Jewish education, isn't really affiliated with any like Jewish activities or organizations, they're still coming, even, right? It's not even subconscious. It's really like in the in the forefront of their mind, even that they're coming, that they exist in a progression that's been going on for a long time. Like their forefathers went out of Egypt. Their forefathers stood at Sinai. Their forefathers were in the land of the Canaanites and were exiled and came back and were exiled again and were in this. They were in the European exile and the Arab land exile. Like they had all these experiences. There's a lot of experience there. They're part of this story, right? Now, whether they consciously like that story or not, that's a different issue. But they're coming with this awareness that they are part of this big story, and like this is this milestone in that story.
And you sitting by yourself right now in your apartment, learning on Yom Ha'atzmaut because of coronavirus, right? So that's why you're not in Gan Soccer with like 1,000 other people making barbecues, right? Yeah. Is part of that bigger story.
Correct. It is. And it's yet to be understood how this whole experience for us is going to play in to this bigger story.
Yeah, what do you say about this? How do you we haven't even spoken about it, which I think is actually a good thing. Like seriously, man, it's like it's all that everyone talks about.
It's not right. We're not ensconced in the chaos. We're having a little bit of
like but let's bring in that thread, like coronavirus and Yom Ha'atzmaut. What are your thoughts?
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't see such a profound connection. I think that
no, I'm not saying there's a connection. I'm just saying, what are your thoughts?
I think that this has given us another opportunity to see one of the unique abilities of Israeli society of dealing with serious hardcore crisis. I mean, we've had wars in recent memory, right? We've had a few serious wars in the past, decade and a half, but they don't come close to any of, the full nationwide, full on crisis that people experienced in the earlier years. I think this is the first time in a long time that Israelis, I mean, how long is a long time? The country's been around for 70 years, as you said, but relatively speaking, this is the first time where Israelis are experiencing a crisis that is so all-encompassing that every single facet of their life is affected by it. And to see how people are responding to that is just really, really incredible. I read an article written by someone outside Israel, and he called it crisis emotional intelligence. That there's a skill that you like, it has to be honed, that to be able, like, how do you act appropriately in crisis? And it's like two extremes of happy-go-lucky of screw all this, I'm just gonna act as if everything's normal on one extreme, and on the other extreme of like locking yourself in a closet until all clear, right? Like those are the two extremes, and being able to ride the middle of that and function in a normal, productive way, while being aware of the danger and at the same time yearning to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. That's not something that people naturally have. It's not it requires honing, it requires development. and it's it's really part of the culture here that people are able to like obviously there are exceptions to this, right? But it's really part of the culture here that people are able to deal with serious crisis in a very effective way, and to see how like everyone's come together pretty much for that is really great to see. And I would note that like the fact that we react in such shock to the exceptions is that's the indication that like the rule is what it is on the
Sounds
most
like
part.
there's a fire truck outside of your house.
Yeah, there's a fire truck outside my house. Anyway, close the window, but that's a little bit better. Yeah, those are my thoughts about this, and that certainly like it certainly brought that up, and to see how like everyone can come together even in circumstances like this, which in a crisis that affects literally everything in a profound way, that people are still responding as they do. So
and do you have any Torahs for Yom Ha'atzmaut? I mean, I know we've been talking a lot of Torah, but
do I have a Torah for Yom Ha'atzmaut? What are we
doing? I know. That's what we've been talking about. I know that our whole conversation has been Torah, but I mean, like specifically, like Yom Ha'atzmaut reminds me of this Torah, or Yom Ha'atzmaut brings to mind this Torah, or specific midrashim, divrei Torah, psukim.
That's a good question. I'll tell you, there's another holiday in the Jewish calendar called Tu B'Av, right? The 15th of Av, which we will merit to celebrate in a few months from now. This holiday is usually it's love and intimacy between couples, and like that does have a basis in the Jewish tradition. But really, the origins of this holiday are predate any event like that. They're certainly not fundamentally tied to that. The origins of this holiday are very interesting. Right? As we know, the sin of the spies in during the desert, the Jewish people are at the cusp of entering the land, and they send a contingent of spies to scout out the land and see how they're going to enter it, and they come back with their bad reports, and the bad report sparks panic, and everyone's freaking out, and it ends up not good, right? And as a result of the Jewish people rejecting the entering the land plan, so they are doomed to remain for 40 years in the desert. And this was the culmination of a long pattern of rebelling against God's plan and not going with the flow, and various other sins which we don't need to go into right now. But the point is, the Jewish people, this was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. The Jewish people are sentenced to 40 years in the desert as a result of this.
Right, that happened on Tisha B'Av.
Correct. On the 9th of Av is the day that this report of the spies was delivered, and the Jewish people responded in the way that they did. And that was the day that it was decreed upon them to not enter the land. Every year on Tisha B'Av, for all of those years, on the 9th of Av, for all those years in the desert, there would be a decree, and people would die overnight on Tisha B'Av every single year. This was a night of very heavy national mourning for the entire period of the desert. And then in the final year of that process, right, the year that the Jewish people did in fact go into the land, so that Tisha B'Av, no one died, like everything was fine. And the people woke up in the morning and say, well, we must have like counted wrong, like it must not really be Tisha B'Av, like maybe it's a few days early, and we messed up with the calendar. And they woke up the next morning and everyone was fine still. And like this went on for a few days. And by the 15th of Av, by the 15th of the month, they realized that no, like it's all clear. Like we're good. We're in the clear. Like we're going in, right? The decree of destruction has been lifted. Like we've gotten through, right? So the 15th of Av, my source for this, by the way, anyone that wants to look it up or thinks that I'm making this up, this is in the commentary of Maimonides on the on the Mishnah at the very end of Tractate Ta'anit. You can look this up. It's a very powerful section. On the 15th of Av was the day that the Jewish people realized that they were good, that they were good to go, that the decree had been lifted. And the language of Maimonides over there is Chazru v'he'eminu ba'atzmam u'batchu b'nafsham, that they believed in themselves and relied on the power of their own souls.
That's what Maimonides said.
This is what Maimonides says.
That is so deep.
Sorry?
That's so deep. They believed in themselves and relied on the power of their own souls.
Yeah. It doesn't get much deeper than that. So that was the event. That was the event of the 15th of Av. Right?
Yom Ha'atzmaut.
They collectively realized. They collectively came to an awareness that they were that they could do it. That they could actually.
That's a Yom Ha'atzmaut day. It's another day of Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Correct. In fact, there are some sources. There are some sources that indicate that was, in a way, I don't want to say it was the first Yom Ha'atzmaut, because that's obfuscating the point a little bit. But it's like this was the first holiday like Yom Ha'atzmaut, in that it was the holiday celebrating the entrance into the land.
Celebrating that we can do it.
Sorry?
Celebrating that we can do it.
Correct. And it's right. It's celebrating that we can do it, and in a way, Yom Ha'atzmaut is celebrating that we can do it, right? Ha'atzmaut, right? You could say that, you could translate it as Independence Day. I guess that's not a wrong translation, but I think a more accurate translation is strengthening to the point of self-sufficiency, of self-sovereignty, of independence, right? Atzum, right? Strength, otzem, right? Like the
bones.
To reach that state of self-reliance and self-confidence. That's the thing that we're celebrating here. And again, it's not just a reaction and a celebration. It's not just celebrating an event that we are the objects of. We are actively pursuing it. We're actively trying to grab onto it and bring it in. And fan the flame. And B'ezrat Hashem, on the personal level, for sure, I think this is something that, like, we all have our own spheres where we need to have a Yom Ha'atzmaut, right? Like, there's a Yom Ha'atzmaut for the whole Jewish people, but like on our personal levels, we all need to have our own personal Yom Ha'atzmaut, where we can say that we're independent, we've achieved that sovereignty, we've achieved that self-mastery. And in our own domain, we have an independent.
They believed in themselves and relied on their own souls.
Yeah.
I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah.
And I think it also sums it up from both a physical and a spiritual perspective, because it means they did two things. They believed in themselves, right? And they relied on the power of their own souls, implying like a surface level and then a deeper than the surface level.
I like that. I can go with that.
Yeah. All right, Shammai.
Yeah, Eitan, this was fun. You're going to upload this to YouTube?
Say it again?
You're gonna put this on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm going to put this on YouTube. This is on Facebook right now. This whole thing has been on Facebook Live. We have a comment from another Baltimore Chevra, Shana Howard. She said, your discussion about making space reminded me of Yaakov laying down stones when he was on his way to Laban's house. And then she wrote later, laying the stones around his head before he went to sleep. Not sure I'm fully following, meaning that in making space, as in the space that he made was the space around his head.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure specifically what she's alluding to in the comment, but it happens to be that there's a comment in the Midrashim that actually do strongly connect that event to what we were talking about. The rabbis say on that event. So Jacob is on the run from his brother, and he stops in the spot overnight. He makes like a little shelter with these stones, and he has this dream, right? The famous dream of the ladder, right? The angels ascending and descending. And he wakes up the next morning, and he says, right? He declares on that spot, and in tradition, the spot that he happened to lay down on that night, that spot was the Temple Mount, right? He he declares, Ein zeh ki im beit Elohim, right? This is none other than the house of God. That's what he says, okay? And the rabbis say, where was the house? There was no house. This was a barren hill in the middle of nowhere, right? Where's the house? Yaakov kra'o bayit lifnei shehaya bayit. Jacob called it a house before there was a house, right? So for Jacob, he sees the house. He sees the house in front of his eyes, even though there is no house, right? So like the putting down of the stones, it was like the initial marking the territory, so to speak. Like this is the spot where the house is going to be, even though there is no house, but this is the space for the house, right? So Yaakov, he can already see it. He can already see the house, even though he will never see the house. There will not be a temple in his lifetime, right? But he can see it because he's made that opening. Right?
It's interesting because Shauna just wrote earlier. You mentioned that we have to create the space for the person one wants to become. So yeah, that dovetails to what you're talking about right now, which dovetails to what she was talking about in terms of the stone. That that it's But what's interesting on that note, and this is just something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I want to create some content on this. Is just the difference between what people call the law of attraction, which is like red Ferrari, or like whatever they're like, the universe is listening to me. I'm focusing my intention, because intention's a powerful word. Red Ferrari. And it's like there's such a big difference between that and I think what's a much more real concept that comes from Torah, from Pirkei Avot, when it says that if you make your will his will, he will make his will your will. Meaning that like concept of co-creation, that you are aligning your will with God's will. And that should be our next
conversation. It's funny that you're bringing this up because I was thinking about that particular teaching recently, that Mishnah and Tractate Avot. And I read quite a long section in the Maharal and Rav Yehuda Laui, right? The Maharal of Prague with the Golem story, for anyone who wants that reference, that fictional story that never happened. But it's like they say about it's like that famous joke they say about these two Jews are arguing about this particular rabbinic persona, and he says, this rabbi is so great that I heard this and this story about him, and his friend responds, you think that story is true? It's obviously a fake. And his friend says, yeah, but they don't tell stories like that about you, right? Right? Meaning the legends, the fact that there are legends says something. There's a lot of truth to that. Anyway, yeah, that should be our next video.
So that concept of Yaakov seeing the house, right, is co-creation.
Yeah. Correct. Yes. Yes, yes, I agree with that. I agree with that strongly. It was very, very very poignant observation.
Yeah.
So,
hey, my friend.
Eitan, this was good.
Yeah, this was good. I feel like we digested a lot of information. Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Yeah. This was good.
Yeah. And thank you for everybody out there who's been watching. Shout out to Shauna Howarth. Shout out Ben Tripp. Shout out to Yisrael Levine, Gedalia Ort. Lots of good peeps tuned in. Thank you for everybody who watched. Aleph Mail, Carmel 56 chocolates. Yeah, there's the Gashmias and the Ruchnias, or the Ruchnias and the Gashmias.
Okay, man. Okay, man. Let's do this again soon.
All right, let's do it. Co-creation. All right. Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.
Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.